education and AI, as today is International Education Day, and this is also looking at preserving human agency in the world of automation. I've got some word that you'll be surprised to see, yes, because we're talking about AI technology. We had to go fetch ourselves a tech expert. Collins Teke, who is a tech expert, is in the studio this morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Blessing. Good morning, Doctor. Good to see you.
Collins, it's a pleasure to have you on the show this morning.
I mean, the pleasure is all mine. I must say that I'm really glad that you invited me, because it's an area that I'm very passionate about.
You know, Teke, I was hoping to see you bring in a robot and some other things, because, hey, we're talking about technology, so I wanted to see all of that.
Yeah, the irony is, especially the subject matter, that's AI. You know, that top of my head, I can count up to like 10 different areas of AI that have nothing to do with robots. It's just one aspect that has to do with robots, but generally there's a misconception about AI. You know, people just believe that it's a robot that's coming to take over people's jobs. And I think that is where what we're doing now, especially this kind of conversation, is important, so that we can actually educate people about what exactly is AI. And is it something that is a robot that's coming to take over people's job? Is it a tool that's to be used to enhance our jobs? You know, will it displace people, industries? Will it disrupt? And all of these questions.
But you think those fears are unfounded?
No. They're very, look, to a large extent. You know, let me use a typical example. Every technology, whenever there's a new technology, if you go back in time, even when internet, you know, came on board, a lot of people were they had skepticism about that particular technology. They're like, okay, you mean I can stay here and send a message and all of that? And so people kicked against it, that it was, they put spiritual connotation and all of that. That's because there's lack of understanding of the technology. Just like AI. Yes, people have genuine concerns about how dangerous AI can be. But that does not mean that it is bad. Now, I look at AI and every technology as a tool. And a tool, you know, it depends on who's handling the tool. That's what's going to determine the outcome. So a typical example, if we're in Lagos now, if you saw a cutlass with an agbero, which is a tool, you know, or at the bus stop, you run.
Yeah,
but if you saw that same cutlass with a farmer, you know that it's going to use it for. So it matters who has access to the tool.
But that is the real conversation today, looking at education and globally and AI adoption. Now, how prepared do you think that a country like Nigeria, indeed Africa, are in terms of really coping with the challenge that AI is bringing to the world?
First of all, just like many other technology, we are lagging behind, no doubt. And in what area? The specific area is in sensitization and education. Infrastructure. Let me give you a typical example. I approached this conversation here when the UN gave the theme to be AI in education. You know, in my head, I did not look at AI in education. I looked at AI in education in Africa. Because that in Africa changes the whole narrative. You say AI in education, well, you're talking about other countries that have the infrastructure, they have, they invest heavily in research. AI cannot
Education, the bedrock of any society,
research and data.
has a right for every
we don't do all of that.
As it helps facilitate learning, knowledge,
context,
skills, values, and habits that enable individuals.
Nigeria, for example, more than half of our population is digitally excluded or digitally illiterate. So that is the major challenge. How can AI be useful in education, for example, when you have a large number of people who are cut off, who cannot even, you know, process and create information online, which of course is what defines being digital literate is. So when it comes to Africa, our approach should be different. We should, first of all, start by educating people before we adopt these technologies, preparing people, educating people for education. Teachers should be able to be trained on how to use these tools, to know how to use these tools. before we can adopt. If not, would end up going into what I'll describe as digital colonization.
Yeah. All right, so let's look at this.
Yeah.
So this is AI and education. That's the theme for this year's International Day of Education. And then there is also a clause to it. It's talking about preserving human agency in the world of automation.
Yeah.
So there are different considerations along the line of use of AI for education purposes. Good, you mentioned at the start that when people talk about AI, they think about robotics, but it's not limited to that. There are different ways AI, artificial intelligence, comes. We even have some of them in use in Nigeria, like the chatbots, which some students are beginning to use for research to find out information and to do their assignments and all. So if we look at ethical consideration, the algorithm, there might be algorithmic bias, there might even be data bias, because the training of this AI softwares that are being in use are not done in Africa. So it seems to be tilted. And when students learn with that, is that actual learning? Is that to say that to an extent, there is the risk of misinformation and disinformation?
All right, so one of the things I've advocated in the push for adoption of AI in education is for us to create local solutions. These AI models can be trained locally. And there are few, yes, when I say trained locally, there are few companies, organizations, or that are actually at the forefront of training our AIs locally. The reason is because AI, especially the ones you mentioned, is garbage in, garbage out. How do I mean? It doesn't think for itself. You have to train it. It relies on data and information to be able to give you results. So that is why most people use ChatGPT. If you go there and just write and say, okay, give it a prompt and say, okay, give me an update. How can I start a business? You know, it will give you general knowledge of how to start a business that is mostly applicable to, I don't want to use the West, but to other climes that are not necessarily in the African domain. But if you have a bionic box, for example, that is trained by local AI experts that considers the very important aspect of the nature of our society and the issues that we really want to solve and answers those questions, when you give that kind of a prompt to such an AI, maybe a machine learning, an AI platform, what it would do, it would give you now information based on data that has been imputed by people who understand the African, what we face as Africans. So, in adopting AI, we must not rely on what is being served us. We must start from here. We must create, adopt the technology and train the models to suit our society.
That's actually the area I wanted to go before really talking about the human agency.
Yeah.
As AI will affect a human being in the near future. In a world that is ever changing, a management expert call it volatile world, where things change at the speed of light.
Yeah.
How will the Nigerian education system help the catch-up syndrome by the Africans? Because before you open an eye, AI has advanced.
Yeah.
And then we're trying to catch up.
Yeah.
Before you know it, it has moved up. How will the Nigerian education system, for example, be able to deal with this catch-up syndrome by the African states in terms of consuming the product that is coming from the West and Asia of the AI?
We cannot adopt AI as consumers only. We should be adopting AI as creators that train these models. One, I just give a simple example. If you look at the statistics right now, as far as literacy, general literacy concerned, digital literacy, you don't have a lot of data to tell us, okay, what is the exact state of digital literacy in Africa. But look at literacy, Mozambique is ranked very low. Nigeria is also part of, part of the countries that, there's a lot of illiteracy also, if you look at it. If you look at what we call digital inclusion and digital literacy, more than half of our population, which is estimated at over 200 million, that's at least over 100 million people that are digitally excluded. That means they have no access either to internet or cannot afford for many issues. Let's look at also infrastructure. As far as infrastructure-wise is concerned, we do not have what it takes to create. We're not investing enough in technology, specifically AI, to be able to control the narrative, all right, what's called AI governance, to be able to govern AI in such a way that it can impact us successfully in the education sector.
No, the question, exact question I want is, how can we begin to create our models without necessarily relying on how do our school system or the managers of our school empower our young people to create our model without necessarily have to rely or adopt what is coming from the other client?
So the first thing I would say is that we need to first of all demystify the mindset that, especially amongst our teachers, that AI is here to take their jobs. It is here to enable them. And then the next step now is to first of all train, before we start creating these models, train our teachers and educators, the entire school system, to understand how AI can help education in Nigeria, to have that understanding, using examples of countries that are already using it. And then we now create models that are suitable with the inputs of these people. Because if you create a model and give a teacher who does not understand how it works, who feels that this is coming to take my job, you don't expect such a person it can't work. Because if I feel like AI is coming to take my job and you're now telling me this is a new AI model, this is how you're going to do with your children, your students these days, what you do is you set up this instead of you teaching, they'll be like, you're taking my job. But if you educate them and let them understand that this is a tool, that's where we should start from. It's a tool that will enhance your job. For example, if you have your papers you've written, your lectures you've written, you can use AI to transcribe, to move your handwritten documents into a digital document. AI will make that happen. You can also align your courses in such a way that it's easier for the students to understand. AI will make that happen. You can also get to use augmented reality, or make use of AI technologies, maybe the screens, to illustrate. If you're teaching a child something about traffic and all of that, you say, oh, if you go to Lagos, and they use their imagination, it's brilliant. But it can also show them by, animated reality, which AI will make that happen. So these tools of AI from different angles are there to enhance this teacher's work. But the first step, just to answer your question directly, it's not about let's train models, let's make it. Let the people who are going to execute, who are going to use this AI tool, be trained on, or be educated, sensitized on what this is. The first misconception is the fact that it is not here, or is here to take your job as a teacher. No, it is here to enhance your job.
Okay. Now, let's look at some challenges to AI adoption.
Yeah.
Now, you've talked about that on the part of the teachers, that AI is here to take their job. There is also another misconception on the side of the learners, the students, that dependency on AI might not make them be very smart thinkers, critical problem solvers, which brings us to the issue of human agency. Remember when calculators were introduced in schools, and then some teachers discouraged the use. They'll tell you should be smart enough to know 2 times 2 is 4, 4 times 4 is 16. Stop depending on calculators. If you keep using it, you may not be able to use that to do calculations. So without calculators, if you find yourself in an exam, it may mean that you are handicapped. Some students are also receiving that because when they want to do assignments and then they want to turn to the use of AI, there seems to be, if you keep depending on this, after a while, you may not be able to come up with solutions by yourself. There is that. And there is also the challenge of infrastructure, as you pointed out. How do we tackle that there is no inequality? In the rural areas, for instance, some still depend on the blackboard. It is even now some are moving to the use of marker board. So how then do such schools move to the use of gadgets? Because there has to be that holistic move to AI education.
Look, the truth about that concern, it's a valid concern about how AI, over dependence on AI, can, cause you to affect your thinking, or cause you to not be able to, especially students, not to be able to think, assimilate, they now rely on AI and all that. But I will go back to the point of the fact that it's all about education. It's all about understanding that is a tool. And the way AI, most of them, not all, most of it is created or is designed, I said it's garbage in, garbage out. How do I mean? Your creative thinking skills comes to play, to bear. Why? Let's use, any of these generative AI, or, the chatbots, bots that we talk about, like, what do you call it, ChatGPT and a host of others. If what makes the outcome is not what the AI has, it's the prompt that you give it. So from that point of prompting the AI is where your thinking comes in. So at the end of the day, if you still do not think and you do not creatively put your thoughts together, you cannot still use the tool. So instead of saying we're dependent on it, I think people need to understand that you have to keep, in fact, for you to be able to prompt AI properly, you would have to still think. You would have to still put your creative imagination to bear. What AI does is that it brings your mind, all right, what you're thinking in your mind, to life for you, so that you can actually see it. All right, it's easy, and that's how it enhances. Now, just like every other tool, if people are not taught or educated on how to use a tool, they're going to use it wrongly. That is why when some manufacturers bring out products, they spend time teaching people about how it works, how they can use it for good. Now, what we should guard against is the fact that people have access to this for educational purposes within our school system, and they are not guided or they are not governed on how to use it productively. Just like social media, bring it up. Just like social media, a lot of people felt that social media was evil because a lot of people use it for evil. But it's not about the platform. It is not about the technology. It is about the user. So the user needs to be educated. If the students and the teachers are properly educated on how these technologies, especially AI, can aid them, they can pass that down to the students, and then they can use it better.
But taking again the user case you just mentioned, we also understand that AI is not human.
Yes.
It has no capacity to think. Only aggregates the things that are available online. Mm-hmm. And in an African setting where, for example, many things have not been digitized, don't you also see that while we're trying to use AI to drive knowledge, that will actually only be amplifying the people whose data are already online?
Yeah.
That, for example, the research that we're doing may not be relevant to Africa. Because recently we just talked about, earlier in the show, on the ranking of the universities. You see that when you buy a regular text, typed text, you can't even see African citation on it. How will AI reflect African peculiarity when our work are not documented online?
So, Doctor, look, who's going to document our work? I believe it would be we are the ones who document our work. Like I mentioned in my opening remark, that AI is, like many other, specifically AI, relies solely on data. So it's garbage in, garbage out. If you train it with data about Africa, and you build a model that focuses on data about Africa and how our society works, that is what it's going to give you. So the challenge here is not whether AI is good or not. The challenge is that the source of the AI or AI tool that we are relying on has to be from here. So our challenge now goes back to the issues. Why can't we train AIs that would speak to the African situation? Now, this is a challenge that most of us are not looking. A few people are looking into that direction. But the likes of Google and big other AI companies are paying attention to it. Do you know that Google has been documenting Pidgin English and other Nigerian languages so that you can actually have a conversation with it in those languages? It would actually use them. But you, as a Nigerian, when you check that, you will still find out that there are still some commands in the Pidgin. You'll be like, okay, it's not a good Pidgin. This Pidgin still get a comma inside. That's because they are also relying on available data. But now, how do you generate data? It's through research, it's through documentation. How much do we invest in as far as research is concerned? It is one area that we do not invest in. As we speak right now, I stand to be corrected. Nobody can stand and tell me categorically that this is the number of people, even students, we have in our educational system. Because based on what data, how did you count it? How did you get it? No. So because we don't invest in those areas, those are the real issues. Not about the tool itself, but we need to invest in infrastructure. We need to invest in, training, imputing data or creating models and getting the right data that will give us the result that is in alignment with what Africans can relate to, not relying on a model that is trained, based on a society that is not exactly what we experience here in the African continent.
To avoid the catch-up syndrome, which seems to be very prevalent in Africa when it comes to technology, then there has to be upskilling so that you can match up and begin to come up with your own technology or improve on it. In what areas specifically does Africa or Nigeria, now because we're broadcasting live from Nigeria, has to improve upon that will help the educational system? We talked about augmented reality and how chatbots, some of them are able to translate what is written into several other languages and different apps. So what areas should we be focusing on that will help the educational system?
All right, we'll look at the biggest challenges we have. One of the infrastructure, and then we'll also go to training. We need to invest more in the issues that have stalled us from taking advantage of technological advancement. I mentioned earlier that large number of our population are underserved or unserved totally. Electricity-wise, more than half of the population do not have electricity. Access to internet, just about 108 million people, can boast that they have access to internet, of which most of them is not steady. All right, general investment in training, research, and development. We have to invest in these areas first. If we do not invest in these areas, I'll go back to what I said. We'll end up going back to what is called digital colonization, where we're only consuming. And each product you consume has an agenda, has their own target and goal that may not necessarily be in the interest of the people who are consuming.
Okay, talking about, again, use a case here. What specific policy issue will you expect from the regulators of the Nigerian education system to put in place? Also taking into cognizance the fact that we don't have so much money to invest in training and equipment. What are the short measures you think that can be put in place right now within the education system to actually put Nigeria and indeed Africa on the path of also becoming a competitive player in the AI environment?
All right, the very first part is our government and agencies, the NITDA of this world, those that are making policies that govern, the policies that have to do, the frameworks that have to do with ICT generally, they should focus on what is called AI governance. They should pay attention to it. And AI governance has to do with how the tools, the AI tools, who controls what? Who controls what? Because that's what's important. Because if you do not pay attention to that, you may not be able to create models. You'll be guided, you'll be governed by whoever is in control of the governance within the AI ecosystem. Another area is we must understand that nobody, all right, I mean, AI governance, look into the policies that have to do with AI governance, all right? Another area is we have to make policies, when we have dealt with that, that would address the issue of investment in, since you say we don't have money, I don't believe we don't have money, it's about priority. Investment in AI in education in Nigeria or in Africa, as the case may be. The likes of, and then we have to have a data policy that would bring, work on our data policies that to be able to galvanize, because AI cannot function without data. To be able to put our data, to kind of like aggregate and put our data together. Because if we do not have that, then we cannot even take advantage of AI. So these are the areas, in the area of AI governance, in the area of our data policies, whether for privacy, from how we get to, have our data, and also in the area of research. We need to, focus on that particular area, these particular areas, before we can say we want to use AI as a tool to help our education. If not, we would end up just adopting something that has a model that may not necessarily be, very, very, may not carry the agenda, the goal of the Nigerian or the African dream, if you like. And then at the end of the day, we'll now be colonized digitally by those who have created these models. That's what I think we should focus on. AI governance, AI governance, AI governance. What does that mean? And how can we be at the forefront? Not that will determine what, where it goes in terms of what direction. That is why I mentioned in the topic, AI in education. For me, I would say AI in education in Africa, because AI in education, you can't generalize it, because there are specific situations, there are different unique situations in every country, and of course, most in the African continent specifically, in Nigeria. All right? You can't say AI in education. If you want to talk about AI in education in Nigeria, you can't talk about, adopt. You first of all talk about fixing infrastructure, fixing the policies like you talk about, fixing all the issues like, that have to do with access to these tools. So you can't generalize that AI in education. You must look at how it speaks to our specific challenges and where we are as far as that is concerned.
Now, talking about access. Now, there are different tech companies. Some of them focus on providing educational solutions, AI solutions, and all that. One of the things that, or one of the factors that reduces access is expensive nature of these solutions. If we're talking about creating our own, aside the data being available for training of this AI, what can you say as some of the challenges of local tech companies in providing some of the solutions locally?
Funding is one of the biggest. That is why the government, and the private sector and the big money spenders must pay attention to funding, must support. All right, there's so many companies that are working very hard to bring about trade models in AI that will solve some of these issues. But one of their challenges is funding. Even if they get funding to start and to scale, it becomes a problem, because now you have to pay very high to just to be able to scale. People now have to pay for the services very high, as it were. So I think that we need to push a lot of funding into that sector, identify, all right, how we want to use AI to help our education sector, and encourage local innovators to come up to build models that will solve our specific issues in this education sector, and then support them with policy frameworks and funding, most importantly, to be able to bring this to life, and also subsidize it along the line. The funding will be able to subsidize it also to help people to have access to it without paying through their nose.
Yeah, funding. I know we can't do without funding, and that's why I'm actually asking. Are you also thinking that we have enough competence within the Nigerian educational system to actually drive this narrative? And if not, is it also important to find collaborations between these institutions of learning and the conventional schools or universities and, of course, fintech and AI companies that are domiciled in Africa to collaborate in terms of training? Take, for example, you have a lot of people with PhD in computer science, and actually what they study is mathematics, and they're actually not computer scientists. You have cases where you have people who teach you computer, and they are not even able to use computer, because we just teach you the theory. So how are we going to balance the time and the gown synergy, so that rather than relying on the conventional teachers who don't have the competence or capacity, and then you are having people who are visitors to the universities to actually give the students hands-on learning on the use of these technologies?
On the matter of competence, let me speak to that quickly. We are aware that some of the biggest key players in tech, in emerging technology, AI being one of them, in so many of these countries, in the US, for example, in the past 20 years, you count a large number of Nigerians. And I'm not talking about Nigerians who were born there. There are a lot of people who actually just from here studied studies, went to school, and they are driving the economy. In cybersecurity, I can mention a large number of names. All right. You have the likes of Sheyakinde, who has been in the industry for like 20 years or plus, and in cybersecurity and AI, who has worked with some of the biggest brands at the global stage, who has come back now to Africa, to Nigeria, to start building solutions that have to do, that we speak, because he understands that, look, this cannot solve our problems. You know, adopted technology from the West, for lack of better expression, cannot solve our problems. So he's been there. He comes back to create something that would speak to our issues. So when it comes to competence, there are a lot of people. But if there is good policy on ground, there's support, and the government, that's going back to the policy issue, they understand the importance of this, more and more people will come in on board. And these are the people that will train.
I speak to is within the conventional school system, the university system.
Yeah. They have to be trained.
Yeah, that's the point I'm making. Is it possible for people like Sheyi to become visitors to some university? To students who are actually doing computer science.
Let me not cut you short. He's been personally busy because, I mean, there's a number of projects. I'm in the ecosystem, so I interact with some of these guys, see what they're doing. He has not just been going about training schools, even corporate bodies, government institutions, you know, how they're going to automate, how they can use AI as a tool to better the entire processing of what they're doing. Now, we need more people like these who have this knowledge, who also understand how things are being done or what the situation is back home, who would not rely on Google or reports published to make a decision about, oh, I think this way Nigeria is, you know, there are Lagos, there are yellow buses, you know, and all that, and just, you know, speculate. Somebody who was born here, who has been here, who comes here regularly, who also has the knowledge of what is obtainable within the AI ecosystem generally, to marry these two knowledges and then get the best out of it. Training our teachers, go into the education sector and letting them know, starting from the point of telling them, because that is more important, telling them that AI is not here to take your job. AI is here to enhance your job. And then moving on to the technicalities. All right, what are the skills you need to have? What are the areas and opportunities also that AI brings to the table? You know, that is what I think we should be doing. Because if we do not train the people who are going to use this adopted technology, then who's going to run it? We'll end up, like you said, bringing foreign people coming here. And everything that is foreign, guys, just know this, has an agenda. It can never be in the interest of the consumer.
Knowing that there could be an agenda which could mean a bias against or a bias for.
Yeah.
what are some of the pitfalls to avoid when interacting with AI, whether as a teacher or as a learner, and what obtains another climb? The exposure, how does the level of exposure to AI take place? We find that we have Montessori schools now in Nigeria. There are very many of them. And then in a bid to seem like, oh, we're global standards, could there be some wrongful exposure of children, of learners, to certain AI?
Okay, so I think that's part of the things that AI governance speaks to. Because apart from, setting the tone, issues like regulation, data protection, and rights, digital rights, and all of that are all embedded within what constitutes what we're talking about. So that is why in adopting AI, I said that we must be involved in the governance of AI. If the government does not pay attention to that, then you cannot control it. You now have to rely on, external bodies to control it. And for example, there are societies today that believe in so many things that are against our values in the African system. Recently, what happened in the US? The people are still appealing on national TV that, we should not have just two genders. You've seen that happen. And these things are alien to us, for example. So if we are not interested in the governance and make inputs that are in line with what our values are within our system, then we'll end up finding ourselves in a situation where we cannot protect our citizens. One of the ways is to ensure that there are data protection policies and the rules, strict regulations for these AI companies, all right, to adhere to in the interest of the users. So if you don't have, it took a long parents to go against a lot of platforms like YouTube and a host of others before they created something called YouTube Kids that has certain kind of contents that, only kids can watch. Even at that, they still give parents the power to be able to put timers, to be able to put restriction passwords. And then most of our phones that come with AI and all of that, they have gadgets. Samsung, for example, will have a kids interface that can help, children not to have access to it. In AI governance and in AI molding, we should also pay attention to these regulatory frameworks and also this policy to protect data and protect our children. And it's the government that's going to enforce that and say, no, your AI, we need to check the framework of what your AI is bringing, your AI solution. Does it, is it in line with the standards that we've set? If we do not set that, and then we'll keep falling.
Thank you so much, Collins Teke, tech expert, who's been talking about AI and education with us on the Front Burners.